Oh.
Oh, that might be. Oh, that's better. Wow. Yeah. My humble apologies, but I just turned on the microphone. And so, look, I'm just going to go through the roll call. We'll just head straight into our agenda. Thank you so much for your patience. So, in the room, we've got myself, Councillor Casey, His Worship the Mayor, Claudia Weiss, our boss lady director. We've got Ed, you've got Rob, you've got Catherine with a K. We've got two of the ladies at the back with the video. We have Councillor Coombe, Councillor Hills, Suard, Maya, and we've got Claire at the back. So look, that's the people in the room. I now have to do a roll call. So Councillor Bartley.
Alf, I
Thank you for the messages on our chat. We're just waiting for our ladies to.
can't hear you through that. Can only hear you through your Skype.
Yeah, I'm doing that now with my Skype one. Yeah. So look, we're just waiting for the technicals to get sorted out. Look, we still have some issues, but we're going to continue because apparently you can hear me, which is sometimes not a good thing. But look, I just want to sort of say welcome to everybody, and I just need to follow some of the procedures for the standing orders and to advise you who's in the room. So very quickly, His Worship the Mayor, Councillors Casey, Coombe, Hills, myself, we've got the Director Claudia, we've got Ed, we've got Rob, we've got Catherine with a K, we've got the ladies at the back. We've also got Suad, Maya and Claire and, yep, and so I'm just going to do a roll call. So Councillor Bartley, I can see that you're up there, so thank you.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Collins.
Tuned in by phone, Councillor.
Kia ora, thank you. Mahalo. Councillor Dalton. Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I can see Dalton there.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes, sir.
Kia ora. Councillor Mulholland, I saw you on the sidebar. Thank you.
Present.
Councillor Sayers.
Yes, here, Alf, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, I've seen you on the sidebar as well. Welcome.
I'm here, Marlo.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Councillor Walker.
Only just here. I'm hanging on.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yep, thanks, Al.
Thanks, John. Councillor Young, I heard from you earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Independent Statutory Board Member Wilcox, I've seen you feeding the chooks. And Member Kake. The apologies, I'm going to go through those. Councillor Newman, I've received apologies from him. From Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Matua Honek and Councillor Cooper. Are there any, and Councillor Darby, are there any other apologies for even leaving early? Oh, okay. Sorry, Matua Kake. If not, I'm going to move that. Second, Councillor Casey, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. There's no declaration of interest, there's no petitions, there's no public input, there's no local board input, there's no extraordinary items. We then move into our agenda, and I will move this particular item, and it'll be seconded by Councillor Hills. And it's about the Community Facilities Regional Work Programme 2020 to 2023. Can I just, firstly, before I hand it over to Rob, to introduce his colleague and also those who are online for this agenda item, just to sort of reiterate that this particular item and the PowerPoint was presented in June to the Finance and Performance Committee workshop in regards to the emergency budget. So we have been presented with this. Also, as background, before I hand it over to Rob, the budget for community facilities ended up from 235 million to 98 million, so the reduction was 137 million. This particular item that we have in front of us, the $44 million reduction in this particular agenda item is included in the $137 million. So, Rob, if you could introduce the lovely lady to your left and also those that are online. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so here with me today in the room is Catherine Martin. She's our work program manager for community facilities and has an overview of all our work programs. Also online, some of the people involved in putting together the specifics. So we've got Jonathan Hope and Joseph Bywater, who are also part of our team, looking after the specifics of these work programs. And some subject matter experts here in case there's any specific questions. We've got Shane Hogg and Paul Kleinak, who can respond to the coastal.
You ready, Ian?
And Ross Roberts, also from...
Down by the front door, aren't they?
Sorry, whoever's got their phone still on, can you mute it, please? I've got the number 0212426585. If that's you, can you either mute it or, or go and do some shopping? Thanks. Rob, if you can carry on, that'd be great. Thank you.
So I wasn't going to go through the report in any detail, as the chair said. Hopefully, everyone's reasonably familiar with both the nature of these programs. They come to us all each year, and also familiar with the content of the programs from our workshop that we had in June. I did just want to highlight some of the impacts that we've had on from the emergency budget, just to make sure we were familiar with what that means for this current work program. So as you know, all our CapEx budgets across the organisation were reduced as part of the emergency budget. Community facilities in particular took a substantial reduction in its CapEx budget, and that flowed through all our CapEx budgets. You'll recall we, in terms of prioritising where we allocated the budget that was available, our first priority was given to contractually committed works, and then our next priority was given to renewals of our existing assets. Now, as a result of that, most of our development budgets were quite significantly reduced, and those projects deferred, and that included our OLIs and our LDI CapEx and specific development projects, and also included the growth program, which is part of this report. So other programs that are covered in this report are the regional parks, growth and development. For that program, the renewals were slightly reduced and the development more significantly reduced. We've got the cemeteries renewals and development. Again, the rather modest cemetery renewals budget had a sort of 20% reduction, where the larger cemeteries development budget had a bigger reduction. That was at about 70%. And then coastal and slips budgets had fairly small reductions of about 35 to 40%. The most significant reduction across these programs was in the growth program, and that was a reduction of around 70%, I think. I did have some charts that were going to illustrate that, but there's a technical hitch to showing them, so we'll have to progress without the visuals. Just in terms of how we prioritised what remained in the program, as I said, the first priority was to the contractually committed work. Following that, we made an assessment of asset condition and the criticality of that asset, and a bit of an assessment of what was the risk of failure of that asset, just to make sure that, especially with regard to any public safety issues, but also with regard to service impact. And then we looked also at deferral, the implications of any deferrals, and a lot of our projects have got are related to other initiatives that are happening, whether it's Kaingora developments or other parts of council undertaking developments. So some of our investments associated with other works, and they were prioritised where that was the case. The last thing I just want to mention is we have got 3-year budgets that we're approving here. At the moment, years 2 and 3, that's financial years 22 and 23, the budget provisions are based on what was in the 2018 LTP. So that may well change, and we expect it to change in the LTP coming up. So what you see as years 2 and 3 at the moment will be subject to whatever decisions are made around the budgets for those years in the LTP coming up. So that was really all I was going to say by way of context and background, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Catherine, anything from you? Okay. Look, I'm just going to open it up. I've got a question from Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Oh, look, I think the last statement actually was typing the word question may have been answered. So I'm very happy, obviously, with the emergency budget funding allocations because we know what they are. But the next 2 years that are mentioned in these reports are still to be finalised as part of this LTP. Is that correct? I'm just making sure that that's correct.
That's absolutely correct. As I said, what we used for the sake of having a number was the budget allocation from the
current LTP.
Yeah, from the 2018 LTP. So we anticipate they will change to some extent.
Yeah, okay, got that. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dursley. Matua Wilcox.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My one question is, in all of this, and I understand it's really been held back, is where is the provision for the implementation of the Māori Language Plan 2016? And I'm talking about signage here. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to that corridor. I don't see nothing about signage, because it's either an OPEX or a CAPEX.
So there is, there's two things there, I think, Member Wilcox. One is the Turukuruku program, which there is a separate budget outside of the budgets that are shown in this program, and that will that's budget is held by Park, Sport and Recreation Department, and they work very closely with community facilities in terms of how that's rolled out when the opportunity arises. In addition, where we are undertaking any signage renewals or park upgrades or facilities upgrades, where the opportunity again lies for those renewals to incorporate whether it's dual bilingual signage or renaming of parks, then we take that opportunity as well as part of business as usual.
Just a further question to that, Chair.
Aye.
Yeah, so my question is, why aren't we doing the replacement of signage now with bilingual signage? We've had this plan since 2016. I understand that signage is kind of an ad hoc process, but I've kind of got to the bottom of who organises the signs, and it seems to be project managers on whichever job's going. But I don't understand why this implementation of this Maori language plan isn't occurring as part of normal OPEX or normal CAPEX. And so I'm just kind of trying to get some hold on this, because I'm not happy to approve a plan like this. I know the budget is really tight, but I just want some security and understanding that no new signs will go up whatsoever unless they're bilingual. That was the council's response to the Maori Language Act 2016. So our Maori implementation plan has specific rules around having bilingual signage. So I just want to dig that out and get some insurance today. And I preface that with the fact that actually this is going to cost us no more or no less. So it's actually not a budget issue, to be honest.
So where signage is being replaced through the local board work programs, the question of bilingual is looked at by the staff, and that content gets approved by the local boards. So my understanding of the program is, while many of the local boards have signed up to the bilingual approach to signage, that's not universal across all local boards. So where the boards have signed up, that is happening, and where they haven't, it may not be.
So, Chair, look, I'm gonna hammer this point. The decision as to whether the local boards sign up to bilingual or signage or not, it's really a moot point. It's one of these and any other act that every local body official agrees to when they say the oath to become part of the Auckland Council. So I'm really struggling to understand why any local board is refusing to follow an implementation plan and an act that's put forward by that's put out by the government.
So just to let you know, I think Jane Aiken was also shared that at our PACE committee, and that's something that needs to be addressed with the local boards. So that's been taken on board, Matua, and I think in regards to any correspondence going out, that's exactly where it would be, and I will personally contact Jane in regards to the program around renaming.
It's not about renaming. It's just about replacement of signs. That's all.
No, I understand that, but we have the regional project, but then the local boards have the decision making in regards to that, and those issues were addressed when it came through to the PACE committee last month, I think it was.
Thank you.
Councillor Hills, there's a comment in there if you want to.
Oh no, it was just adding to that. I think I said it last year when I think there are more local boards who have signed up this term, but last term there was only 11, and I said that for our treaty obligations and doing what's right for the whole city, we should have a regional approach if those other 10 local boards don't want to come on board. But I have heard that it's up to 15 now, which is a good progress. But I think that our treaty obligations aren't optional, and it's for those communities that aren't celebrated across our city, that's wrong. So, yeah.
No, look, with that, and that was addressed when it came through to the PACE committee, so understand your point. Councillor Henderson, did you also want to, or have it on the sidebar there, was that sufficient for you? Okay, then I've just got another sidebar comment from Councillor Henderson, just saying, look, I will ensure that it gets brought back to the attention of the Māori Outcomes group in regard to this, and I'll get a memo from Fire Jane to send out to the PACE committee to at least give an update on how many local boards have accepted the process. So if there's no further questions or comments, Councillor Coombe.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for the work on all this work on the program. I just had a question about the climate impact statement. So I've just got to find it again. At paragraph 76. And that looks like a good list of things to be considered, but I just wondered where in the process has there been a climate lens, gone over the program to consider whether there might be projects that we just wouldn't even do anymore or do quite differently? And are there any examples of that? And I guess I'm just thinking of, say, of a local board example where the Waitemata local board have decided not to do a trial of not mowing, which potentially saves money and has environmental benefits. So has there been kind of a lens like that put over the work program?
I would say on a project by project basis, as part of the delivery framework which we follow through, which is strategic assessment, business case. So that's where the view of the climate, any climate impact and mitigations is done at that project level. I don't think we could say hand on heart that we've looked across the program and taken a climate impact view of at a program level. It's project by project at this time.
So that might be something that we need to, as an organisation, be thinking about how we look at all of our activities.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. As we get our maturing our understanding of climate, how we respond to the climate challenge, we should be looking at a program level of that. I mean, certainly a lot of the program is quite directly around the impacts of climate. You know, our coastal program and our SLIPS program is all quite specifically around mitigating or managing the impacts of a changing climate. But certainly, I think there's scope for looking at the wider programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think it's probably a more strategic discussion that we need to be having in the same way, you know, like in terms of post-COVID, climate crisis, you know, it's a whole new way of thinking that we need to bring to all of our activities. So I totally appreciate, you know, that we can't just be expected to pivot all of a sudden, but I'd just like there to be a conversation going forward, if that's possible.
No issue at all. No problems.
Thank you, Matua.
I've got a question. Sorry.
So, Councillor, thank you for your comment. It's actually also something that's now in discussion as part of the LTP process. That may give us an opportunity to look at that portfolio lens from a climate change impact as well.
Thank you, Claudia. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ascertain in my own mind what these risk-adjusted programs mean in reality. So I'm looking at a couple that I'm aware of that have been on the books for a number of years, quite vital pieces of infrastructure in terms of accessing beaches and things like that. So am I right, Robin, in assuming that they're projects that have got their timetable and various stages identified here, but if there's a shortage or if there's a failure to deliver other projects, they will get bumped up the list. Is that the basic reading of it? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the intention is we would look to start those risk-adjusted projects and take them through to a sensible hold point. And as you say, if other projects that were anticipated to be done this financial year for any reason get delayed or held up, typically, in planning consent or something like that, we've got a project ready to go that can just fill in that place and fully spend the budget. So some of those risk-adjusted programs may get delivered earlier if some other projects are delayed.
Okay, so just a follow-up question then. In terms of advancing them to the stage where where the construction can actually occur, what's the situation where where that has already occurred then? So like investigation, designs, conceivably consenting, or if they're ready, if they're to that point, then they're ready to go to construction. So I guess my concern is that with a number of them, that then they just go into another further holding pattern, and it's like the never never. So is there some sort of overview of specific projects that really gives a little bit of comfort to the belief that, and I'm thinking of the community here where there's perhaps been ongoing inquiries for years in terms of their preparedness to go. So if they have jumped through those pre-hoops, then is the next stage construction as opposed to just another holding period? I mean, I know that the sum total of the project will come into that consideration too, obviously.
Yes, I think your last point is the important one. So as you move into physical works, that's when the big spend on these projects generally happens. So, and the other consideration is, particularly this year, we have a very tight constraint on not overspending the CapEx budget available. So before we push go on physical works, which will commit us to a big spend on a project in advance of the year that the budget's allocated, we need to understand what other project isn't going to be delivered in that financial year, and be comfortable that because we're doing something early, something else has to be deferred, and we're comfortable with the thing that's being deferred isn't going to cause a problem or other challenges. So we constantly monitor that situation in each of the areas, and make those decisions month by month, depending on what's going on across the different projects and the different programs.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Thanks, John. Got the last question or comment from Councillor Hills, and I will put the recommendation.
Yeah, I guess it was following on from Councillor Watson's comments, just how that, confirming what we've got in the list here is sort of gets done. It just is how we tell the local boards and how we get out there to the public of what is actually delayed and what we can, get started, especially in some of the coastal projects that have been waiting a while.
So you may recall for some of these programs, coastal being one, and the SLIPs and the growth program, those projects, once you've approved them, they go into the local board programs and become local board decision making around the details. And so the local board is updated by our area teams on a monthly basis alongside all their other projects about progress projects of those ones. In terms of then getting that message to communities and keeping communities updated, that's generally done through those local area teams and local boards. And I guess it's fair to say in a range of different mechanisms for doing that, whether it's consultation or newsletters or other social media updates. But that's generally via the local board comms team rather than any kind of central overview.
Cool. So the allotted amounts year by year in here, is it probably best for me to come to you on specific ones? Because how different could they be from this? Is it just 1 year that things might be pushed out, or we're trying to do as much as we can in the current timetable? The coastal one's not that far off budget.
So what we think this financial year, what's in this financial year, because we've had to go through that quite rigorous process of reducing and refining, what's in the current program is what we think is deliverable. We're confident that's deliverable, so we don't anticipate a lot of change from what's in the program you're approving. We are obviously aware that things come up and things do change, and so there may well be some shifts across, but in essence those projects will progress as fast as they can. And if there's a delay, they might get delayed because of that, but then to happen as soon as possible once the delay is resolved.
Perfect, thank you.
Now look, I'm just going to put the recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Rob. Catherine. Next item is stage 2 of the Auckland Cultural Heritage Institutions Review. And again, just to recap for everybody, this was mentioned by Ed and Alistair at the CCO review workshop. And there was also some comments made at the governing body, the last governing body. So look, I'll got His Worship the Mayor to move this particular one, and the Deputy Chair, Councillor Casey will second it. Can I just let everybody know that Maya has sent the resolutions with the changes because of the IT issues we're having. She has sent it to everybody. I'm hoping that you've received it, and if you haven't, let me know so I can read them out to you. But the changes to F, G, and H are not significant. I have spoken to Ed in regards to these three, and there is, however, one change which I thought I'll put in, and that is G, where it's agreed to establish a Parks, Arts, Community and Events Committee-led team consisting of His Worship, well, the Mayor or alternate. That's the only change. It's going to be the Mayor, the Chair, Councillor Simpson, who is the Ward Councillor, and the Chair of the Independent Māori Statutory Board or his alternate, to undertake discussions with Auckland Museum on a rangatira to rangatira basis. So I just wanted to bring those to your attention, and I'll just invite Ed to speak to it, and just to introduce any of the people online that's here as well. Ed, thank you so much.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much, Councillor Filipaina, for introducing this and also for creating the opportunity to have this extraordinary meeting. Otherwise, we would have had to wait until October to have this report, given the committee schedule. And yes, greetings to everyone online and in the room here as well. And I think I've got my manager, Alistair Cameron, online. I don't think we do have anyone from RFA here today, just because of the way the day has proceeded. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the institutions, while not online, will probably be watching on the YouTube feed. Look, in essence, this is a pretty simple report despite its 20-page length. If I could boil it down, what the Cultural Institutions Review is really all about and has been about, it's about delivering on Toi Whetiki, the Auckland Arts and Culture Strategy. Toi Whetiki was signed off by Council in 2015 with a strong political mandate. And this review is really about ensuring that a group of institutions on which the Council invests around $60 million a year are actually held to account for delivering on that strategy. The Stafford review that we commissioned was stage one of the Cultural Heritage Institutions Review, and this report recommended changes in the cultural heritage sector to achieve a unified funding stream and to achieve greater accountability. Following the Stafford report, we entered stage two, and the intention of that was to try and achieve firstly a strategy for the institutions, and secondly some agreed changes to governance, or at least the governing arrangements in the sector. As the report you've got in front of you today notes, the strategy hasn't been achieved. And to be clear, a strategy in this context is one that's subservient to Toi Whetiki, and it's about strategic and investment priorities for the cultural heritage institutions and specifically what we would want them to be doing. It's about giving effect to Toi Whetiki and maximising what Council can do with its investment, but it does sit beneath the overall arts and culture strategy. However, as I say, in the current institutional environment, there's little incentive for boards to sign up to such a strategy, and we haven't made progress on that. What we do conclude is that what we need is some structural changes to precede the strategy, and in a sense, I could draw an analogy with the situation that we had pre-amalgamation, where the institutional structures are what's preventing broader agreement on strategic goals and working together to achieve them. The good news is that with the agreement of Council that the RFA and ATED merger goes ahead, we've got the opportunity to kind of unstick this situation, unstick the status quo. Not only has the Maritime Museum already come out of the ARAFA system and into RFA in 2018, but MOTAD has indicated, now that we've agreed the merger, that it's willing to discuss its future arrangements as well and its relationship to Council. Stardome too is willing to align more closely at a strategic level. There does remain the issue of a conversation with Auckland Museum about its relationship to Council. This has been the subject of several reports, including comments made in the CCO review recently. I don't need to add much more about this, except just to note that the issues that are outlined in the report have been well known since amalgamation, and at their heart are pretty uncomplicated. It's about, in 2020 and for the future, what is the appropriate relationship of the museum to its major funder, the Council? The Stage 2 report reinforces the need, as Councillor Filipaina has said, for a governor-to-governor relationship with the museum. And I'll leave it to Councillor for you to outline a bit more how you see that being handled as we go into the next few weeks and months. The report also makes reference to mana whenua governance in the sector. This too remains an issue to be resolved. These aren't easy conversations, but as Auckland Museum has indicated in its section of the report, they should be a priority for the sector. Finally, this report also refers to some of our smaller cultural institutions and how they might benefit from a more integrated relationship with Council. I would say here one size doesn't fit all in terms of the way that they might relate to Council. But I do think that the merger creates opportunities to really build a genuine network, as Toi Wheteke anticipated a few years ago. So in that sense, Stage 2 hasn't achieved what we set out to achieve is a bit of an opportunity lost. But I do want to thank all the institutions for the contributions that they did make. There's a lot of expertise among the staff in those institutions, and we should look forward to drawing on that expertise and knowledge when the structures are actually in place to develop a strategy. The opportunity is still there to create a sector that's looking to the future and responds to major challenges. The merger and the upcoming talks with the museum really create the chance for all of us to shift from some of the entrenched positions which have prevented progress being made in this Stage 2. So look, happy to take questions and also to hear about how the governor-to-governor conversation will go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you, Ed. And before I throw it open to any questions, and there is one from Councillor Walker, but before that happens, look, this rangatira to rangatira group, as I said earlier, was His Worship the Mayor, or his alternate will most probably be, or will be Deputy Mayor Cashmore, myself as the chair of this committee, and I've spoken to the Deputy Chair in regards to that. There's also Councillor Desley Simpson. The reason Desley, it's because she is the ward councillor where the museum is situated, and then also the Independent Māori Statutory Board chair or his alternate. Now, this particular one, I have spoken to Orchid after we had a conversation with Claudia, Ed and Alistair and the team, the PACE team, and I've had a conversation with Orchid, Ati Malala, who is the chair of the board, and she is willing to meet and then hopefully address the issues that have been identified in Ed's report for us to move forward. We all know that there has to be legislative change that would make the big impact, but what we're hoping to do is during this particular period is to sort of sit down kanohi te kanohi face to face with the board and trying to make a positive move forward. So that's the reason we've ended up getting this group together. I've spoken to His Worship the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor in regard to this as well. So look, Councillor Walker, you got questions, please?
Sure, Alf. I've got a number of questions. I haven't read the Walker report. I wasn't the author, but I can assure you that I'll do that. And I have read the findings, though. I've got some questions that are essentially suggestions. When I read the findings of the report as it goes to visibility, reporting, collaboration, sector strategy, mixed accountability, it's clear to me that there are a number of things that we could be doing now. Quite obviously, we don't have a sector strategy. The only impediment to that is Auckland Council, frankly, prioritising it. And in that respect, Mr. Chair, I think that's something that needs to be added to the priority list for the new chief executive, because that strategy is important. I'd invite a response on that. Around a number of the other things as it goes to collaboration and visibility, I'm quite certain that Auckland Museum would like to be more visible to us, would be more than happy to come along and report to us directly, would probably respond to suggestions that we might make around templating for reporting that would go to all of the cultural institutions, including MOTAT. And I have a question around that, and that is, why don't we get such a template going now, one in advance? I've been advocating that for a while. That also would help to deal with the issue around mixed accountability, and would also help to possibly resolve some of the issues around funding in terms of transparency. So I have a number of questions around why can't we do a number of things now, because I'd suggest we've got more than enough information for that, and we probably have willing parties such as the museum and MOTAT and others that would assist around that. So a question there.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. The short answer is yes, there are a number of things we can do, and there are a number of things that are already happening. So as a result of the previous levy report that we took in, I believe, late June this year, RFA is currently working with Auckland Museum on a reporting template that they are going to supply. It's going to look very similar to the way that the CCOs report to you on a quarterly basis, and so you should expect to see that, I think, when the next Q1 reports come in. So that's a really good thing. You refer to council, no barrier to council developing a strategy, and I have acknowledged in the report that council does need to build its capability, and that's very much in line with what Miriam from the CCO review panel said to you about what council needs to do. However, I would say that there is a limit to, and this is the point I make in the recommendations for my report, there is a limit to how much we can achieve given the institutional barriers. At the end of the day, the institutions, or some of them, work to their own boards, not to our strategy. So that is the barrier to creating that kind of strategy. If such a strategy was possible, we've been trying to create one for a number of years now, I think it would have already happened. And I can tell you from the process that I've gone through, it is not an easy thing.
Okay, well, if I can just make a quick response. As a councillor reflecting on a raft of strategies that we don't have, I would suggest that the reason that we have not got those strategies is not because of other institutions, but rather with ourselves. A lack of resourcing, a lack of priority, a lack of recognition that we needed those strategies. So I do understand the comments that you're making, but I wouldn't blame it on the other institutions. I think we have to accept responsibility for that. And we know that we have to make the organisational changes and the resourcing to make that happen. I'd invite your response around that, Edward.
Well, Councillor, I've been trying to do a strategy with these institutions for the past 3 years and we haven't achieved it. And I think we have tried very hard. But I'm not going to say any more than that.
So Wayne, look, just to let you know, this is why we have recommendation G in our recommendations. And as Ed previously said, once we end up having that initial meeting, whatever comes out of that, we'll be going straight to Ed, Claudia and the others to let them know how we got on with our continuing Talanoa kōrero. Your Worship.
May I ask one related question?
Just one related, and then I'm going to pass it on to His Worship the Mayor.
And that is, the museum have certainly said to me that they would welcome the opportunity to front to the governing body directly. They're happy to do that. Can we make that happen?
From my perspective, no. And that's because I've spoken to the chair of the board, and this is why G is in the recommendation. So, no, we will be talking with the governors to governors. Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Look, just to Wayne's point, you can't have a sector strategy if we don't control how much we fund some of the key institutions, we don't control how that money is spent, and we can't set priorities across the sector. How can you have a strategy if you lack those fundamental parts of what makes up a strategy?
Can I answer that, Phil?
No, sorry. Please, Wayne, you've had a say, and I just want to finish my point, and I'm going to have to give my apologies close to 5 for a TV interview. But look, we've been on this for an awful long time, and Ed is looking rather weary, having been through the arguments many times. I wasn't here when the Walker report was done, but I've seen the summary of its views. I was here for the Stafford report, and we went through those, and we as a governing body endorsed them. And of course, the Dean report was also very clear on what needed to be done. And all of them said that what we need is an integrated strategic approach to the cultural and heritage sector. And the key barrier to that at the moment is legislation that's not fit for purpose. The legislation was passed before Auckland Council existed. It was necessary at that time because you had 8 different councils that squabbled amongst themselves. But it is so unfit for purpose, actually, the funding formula for the museum could require us to fund them up to $146 million a year. And all we could do, we can either approve it or not approve it, and then take it to a costly quasi-judicial process called arbitration. Now, if that's fit for purpose, then it's clearly not. What I find from this report that's interesting is that the museum can present plans to us, but we don't have to agree to them. So there's no use from my perspective in seeing the plans if we don't have any say as to how they can be evolved. We have requested from the museum their asset management plan. Now, since we fund the museum at the moment 97%, I would have thought that a request for an asset management plan would be immediately forthcoming. But I understand from this report, Ed, that we have requested it time and again, and it's not been given. Now, I don't think that you can run a relationship on the basis that the legislation sets down. The legislation prescribes and gives us no room for negotiation, flexibility, or ability to set a strategy. Now, we could seek to change the legislation, and if we succeeded, we'll be there in about 3 years, if we're lucky. And there'll be all sorts of toing and froing before we got there. So what I think we have to do now is to seek to rebuild a proper relationship with the museum. Now, I want to acknowledge here and now that the Auckland War Memorial Museum is a cornerstone cultural institution for our city. I think the job that it does is great. I'm proud of it as a museum, and I am personally very supportive of it. But what I'm not supportive of is this council being required to put $32 million a year into an institution, going up by $800,000 a year, without any say over what the plans are, what the strategy is, or whether this is the key priority that it absorbs more than half of our funding as against other institutions. It may be, but we never have the ability to make that judgment. We've been trying for 10 years to get a result and change, and so far we haven't succeeded. but I think we have to try again, and we have to try from a position of mutual respect between ourselves and the museum. And I read the museum's perspective that is set out in the report, because they have a right to have their perspective conveyed to us. And I take a little bit of hope from the fact that they say they're ready to engage on funding, accountability and governance policy, and they acknowledge our concern about lack of accountability. So I think, Mr Chair, that creates a foundation for our negotiation to go ahead. But it won't be an easy negotiation. It will take an enormous amount of time and patience and flexibility from both sides. But we have to do this because the current framework simply doesn't work for us. And it's not just the museum, actually. MOTAT has its own legislation. The museum has its own legislation. ARAFA has its own legislation. How many times have I sat around this table where people said, this straitjackets us because we have no say over how we spend tens and tens of millions of dollars? And that is absolutely an appropriate criticism. I'm not wanting the museum to be some in-house thing where we determine its operational policies. We don't want to do that, but we do want to set a strategy, and we do want to be able to prioritise across the region. And we do need to know that if we're putting up big money for big capital projects, that those capital projects are or should be a priority. And at the moment, we don't have that power. So I support the recommendations that we've got here. They're not guaranteed to succeed, but we've got to really give it our best shot. And we will do that with every respect for the museum's position, but with an absolute determination that if we fund institutions, we need to be able to set priorities and broad strategies, not to plan their day-to-day operations. So that's why I'm moving this resolution, and I thank you for the work that you've done on it, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Matua Wilcox.
Sorry, Chair, just had to push the button. Yes, I think the Mayor's kind of answered my question in that it sounds like most of the money for the museum is actually coming from Auckland Council. So I suppose I was really querying it in response to to statement 64 in the paragraphs about the taumata iwi. But I think now that I've heard the Mayor's thing that 97% of the funds are coming from Auckland, I think that discussion needs to happen. I just want to make sure that the taumata, that we don't approach it from a taumata iwi and approach them and bully them, that's all. I'd say, because I'm thinking, I'm bringing out a manaakitanga kaupapa here. I just want the taumata iwi to be fully informed of the discussions that we as the council will be having with the people of that run the museum. Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment than anything else.
Yeah, no, I again, as I said earlier, I've spoken to the chair of the board, and they will be advised, and we will be setting the parameters, both us and the museum, in regards to our first hui that we have, rangatira to rangatira. So if there's no more questions from other councillors and Independent Māori Statutory Board, I will move, it's been moved and seconded. I will put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
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 Against?
Aye.
Kia ora, thank you. Look, we've come through to extraordinary business. There is none. I will close as our Matua Hills did. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, hei huarahi mai tātou e te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, hui e, tāki e. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. Thank you, everybody.